Thank you for coming, everyone. So, vendor management is essentially a relationship role. It's the first face that a freelancer sees when they start working for a company, and they're often the ongoing point of contact for all sorts of queries. But as we increasingly move towards automation, efficiency, and speed, what happens to the human factor in our working relationships? And what does that even mean? So I'd like to frame this story by talking about our experience at Vistaprint. Excuse me. So Vistaprint is an online printing company that helps small business owners market their business. We're mostly well known for our business cards, which you may already know about, but we also have other products as well, and even some digital services. So from a translation content perspective, we're talking mainly marketing content, some product descriptions, software localization, site interfaces, that sort of thing. And as a large global corporation, it means that we have an in-house localization team. We don't outsource to an LSP. We actually work directly with our own vendors. So within our team, I'm the dedicated vendor manager, but it's important to remember that when it comes to managing freelancers, you need the buy-in from a whole team. It's a team effort. So in this way, you can think of vendor management more as a bridge between project managers, freelancers, program managers, and everyone in between, basically, when it comes to the localization team. Just take a sip. So, as I already mentioned, we're an in-house localization team of 12, made up of project managers, language leads, and program managers, and myself as the vendor manager, plus we all have hybrid roles, so a little bit of this and that. But we also have more than 50 freelance colleagues that we work with day to day. And these are our invisible colleagues. People don't necessarily see them day to day or even talk to them that much. But they're responsible for much of the same content that we work on, and responsible for what customers see on the site every day. So you may be thinking, so what? That's not unusual in the industry. And you're right, it's not. But it's important to remember that this plays a huge role when it comes to the human factor, and it has a huge impact when it comes to quality translation. So one of the first challenges that I can talk about at Vistaprint is going Agile. If anyone's not so familiar, Agile is a working methodology which allows you to work in smaller, faster iterations. So instead of working on one large project, you can create smaller pieces of work, which allows you to be much more efficient. And so, as teams in the company started to work in this way, this took 2 years for this Agile transformation. This wasn't just overnight. But as teams were started to work in smaller, faster iterations, it had a huge impact on us. So as expectations increased, especially when it came to turnaround times. So you can imagine that now we may receive 50 translation requests in one day very easily. Now these are quite small pieces of work, but they are expected with quite a short turnaround time. And so we had to adapt our workflows. This is not super accurate to every single workflow we have, it's just an illustration. But, gone are the days where we can actually email a translator to see if they can take on a piece of work, if they can agree to the deadline and the terms. Gone too are the days where we can QA and review every single piece of content before delivery. There just simply isn't time. And so in their place, we have auto-assign, which some people may be familiar with already, but this is just where we assign to translators under the assumption that they will take on the work, they will do it, and they'll deliver it on time. But what does that mean for the freelancers? It means that they receive anonymous pieces of work out of nowhere that they work on, deliver, and then just never see again. And this can lead to a lot of problems with disengagement. After all, if your only contact with a client is an automated message from a cat tool, you're going to feel a little bit disinclined to work for that client, or at least you're not going to put a lot of effort there. And so, we wanted to keep a real sense of human connection and accountability. And so, our solution was to build cloud-based server with all sorts of information. And so we make sure to provide as much context and references as possible, not just images, but what the content is, where it's going to live, what's the point of it, just a little bit more context for this anonymous work that they receive. We also created extensive guidelines for every single type of work, like I mentioned, whether that's an email campaign or a product description, or whether it's something to do with software. We also created an FAQ. As I mentioned, we work in marketing, so we have an awful lot of abbreviations and acronyms that are sort of meaningless to anyone who doesn't work in marketing. And so this is a space where they can actually make sense of some of the comments that are put into those files that we request. We also built live Q&A sheets. And these had a huge impact on our efficiency. And basically what these are a space where our freelance colleagues can ask questions on a live sheet and get a response from the PM pretty quickly. Sorry. What it also means is that other freelancers who may have the same question can go to the Q&A sheet and find that actually their question has already been answered. And this is super efficient, and this saves us so much time. And it means that we don't have too many delays and we don't miss our deadlines. Now, I also mentioned that we don't have time to QA every single piece of work before it gets delivered within the process. And so this is where our individual QA and feedback sheets came in. Again, cloud-based, but this is taken out of the workflow process. And what it means is that we can still review translators' work and get an idea of their quality, but it doesn't impact the deadline. This also means that the freelancer is directly in contact with their language lead. As I mentioned, vendor management really is a team effort, and this is where you do need the buy-in of the whole team. Unless you happen to be a vendor manager who speaks 14 languages fluently, in which case talk to me afterwards because that's super interesting. You're going to need your team to help you out on this. And this has also been really useful for relationship building. So the freelancer knows that their work is being seen and that they are accountable for their quality. And it also allows us to see where we can improve as well, where there may be some gaps in knowledge, because this QA sheet really creates a dialogue between the freelancer and the in-house team. Also, at the end of the day, it saves money long term because it's a lot more efficient and the quality is high. So by being responsive and available to our freelancers, it really builds trust that they know that they can rely on us and that they know they'll get an answer. It also creates a sense that we're not just a client-freelancer relationship, but that we're all working together towards the same goal. And ultimately, better relationships lead to better work. Another current challenge that I can talk about is the transition from one translation management system to another and machine translation. So moving from one tool to another is difficult for an in-house team, as you get used to new workflows, new shortcuts, new interface, new everything. And when you add a remote connection into that mix, it becomes a whole lot more complex. Again, for the freelancers, the transition can come out of nowhere. They suddenly just start receiving work in a new tool, and they just have to deal with it, and that's really hard. And so it was really important for us to keep our freelancers in the loop about not only what was happening, but why it was happening. We gave them the reasons behind the change, the reasons that we knew in-house, for like business reasons and stuff like that, just so that, again, they had more context about what was going on. And so this meant that they not only understood more fully, but they really felt included, and again, they felt more like they were part of the team. We also tried to think of them ahead of time. So again, we created a sort of tips and tricks guide for working with the new tool, new shortcuts, screenshots of how it looks, and don't be too afraid, that sort of thing. And we also took their feedback on board. So when we did transition, we reached out to them and they gave us plenty of feedback and told us exactly what they thought. But it meant that we could troubleshoot for them and again, add it to the tips and tricks. And a lot of people actually changed their minds about the new tool. MT. And so this is similar to our approach with MT. As everybody in this room, I'm sure, is aware, these two letters can strike fear into the heart of a freelance translator as robots take over and they're not going to have jobs anymore, etc. And so, again, it's really important to bear that in mind when we're talking about machine translation with our freelance colleagues. We not only let them know, but we ask them for input. So, for example, one of our locally based translators has a lot of experience with post-editing and working with MT with other clients. So we invited her into the office, and this was invaluable for us. This gave us so much knowledge, not only about what it's like to work with post-editing and some kind of things that we hadn't even thought about, but we got the freelancer point of view about what it's like working remotely and some kind of pitfalls that we could avoid that she'd experienced with other clients. And also when it came to testing different machines, let's say we had a few different tools that we were thinking about, we opened this up not just to the in-house team, but to everyone. So any of our curious freelancers were invited to come and test out the corpora as well. And so this sense of involvement really led them to being part of developing the process, which again made them feel much more part of the team, which means MT is not such a scary term after all. Now, the invisibility of our invisible colleagues is not all on them, of course. After all, the teams in the office can see us in our little blue circle. They can't see the other people that we work with day to day. And so it's up to us to elevate them where it's relevant, of course. In fact, lots of people in the office are really surprised to know that we work with freelancers at all. They have absolutely no idea. And I think this reflects quite well on us as well as them, because it means that we're delivering consistent work. Nobody's noticed, apparently. And we're also managing a team of over 70 people, essentially, and it's going pretty smoothly. So, that's pretty good for us. But an example I can give of where we've elevated our colleagues to the people in-house is our sister site, which launched into several European markets last year. Now, this was a lot of content that we couldn't take on in the in-house team, so we relied heavily on our freelancers. And so when the project was launched and everybody was celebrating, we made sure to let everybody know that this was freelancers who did most of the work, which led to them getting a personal thank you from the marketing team, which really let them feel valued by the company. Another example, back in February, Vistaprint went through a complete rebrand. I don't know if anyone noticed. I don't know if anyone's following Vistaprint. But this is the new look. This is the new color scheme, hence my dark background. And so this was some really high-profile transcreation work. This was working directly from the brief, no direct translation required. And so each in-house language lead actually worked with their respective freelancers on this project, really trusting in their talent and their experience to create all of these taglines. And actually, for some of our markets, we don't even have an in-house specialist at all. So for those markets, we're relying completely on our freelance colleagues, which again puts a lot of trust and accountability on them and their work. On the community management side, we have a Facebook group and we have a bi-monthly newsletter as well. And so the purpose of this is to get to know each other a little bit better and improve our work bonds and to create stronger working relationships. And so over the years, we've had birth announcements, we've had mini interviews, both with our freelance colleagues and also in-house, and also with other people like writers and marketers as well. It's not just purely localization based. We've also shared in accolades and certificates within the industry as well. Not only that, we also invite anybody who happens to be in Barcelona, which is where our office is based, to come into the office and meet us and to see where we work, which often leads to a whole lot more questions and going down a rabbit hole. But it's great nonetheless. Many of our freelancers have worked with us for many, many years, some more than 4 years now. And I think this is really testament to this method of working, of keeping them in mind at all times and to try and create a sense of team building. I sent out a survey recently to ask for feedback about how we're doing, the good and the bad, where we can improve, that sort of thing. And you can see on screen some of the quotes that we received about the things that they liked. Obviously, I'm not going to put too many negative things here, but actually, genuinely, we didn't really receive much negativity, and what we did, it was more around gaps in knowledge. And some of the common themes you'll see with the quotes is they really talk about communication, how efficient we are, how we're always responsive, and how we're trying to help, and how we're friendly. And you can even see some people who are saying, I like working with you, I'm going to be available for you, just call me. Well, not call me, we'll contact you some other way. And so you shouldn't stand still, obviously. So what are we going to try in the future? So as I said, I just sent out a survey to our freelancers because you should always ask what they think. You won't know unless you ask them, of course. So for example, I just mentioned some gaps in knowledge. So we're going to hopefully make some webinars and some video trainings about that. We're also going to experiment with our communication method. Our new TMS has a chat feature in the project. And so we're going to see if this is a more efficient way of communicating with our freelancers. So TBD, we'll see about that. And so as we strive towards the demands of globalization, it's really important to remember that many of our experiences are still built on human relationships. They shape how we think, how we work, and who we want to work for. I mentioned at the beginning that vendor management is a relationship role, and I think that this is changing. It's not just about looking after a database of users. It's about creating and maintaining fruitful relationships and effective communication. And so, to summarize what I've learned in my years at Vistaprint as a vendor manager, by being responsive and available, providing as much context on the what and the why of everything that you do, giving responsibility and accountability to your freelance colleagues, and driving engagement and involvement day to day, really leads to a sense of trust, better quality of work, much stronger relationships, and people who want to work for you. And ultimately, at the end of the day, this is what we want. And that's me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jen. That was really a heartwarming story. And it's fantastic to see that there's a company who understands that. So before I open to your question, I actually have a question from me. Because I mentioned at the beginning that you used to work in different roles in localization, but I know that you are also a linguist yourself. So do you think that helps you now in this understanding of those invisible colleagues that you have?
Yes, I too was invisible at one stage. Yeah, there was a few years where I was working as a freelancer myself as a kind of writer proofreader. And I think this does influence my attitude towards vendor management insofar as I've been on the other side where it's just emails and no real talking to people day to day. So yeah, I think that definitely influences this a lot. But yeah, I think it's super important, and like some really small effort can go such a long way to building better relationships. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Hi, I'm Toby from RP Translate.
Hello.
I'm vendor manager myself. And well, I genuinely think you've hit the nail on the head. It's a great presentation.
Thank you.
I strive to build relationships with suppliers. I mean, we haven't got a huge database, with about 500, 600 suppliers. I was just wondering, how do you get the rest of the team to be part of that relationship building when it's mostly the project managers, when they don't actually have time to personalize emails or phone people and actually build that relationship? So it's mostly on the vendor manager's shoulders to do that. How do you get the project management team, if you do work with one, to actually be part of that and to get more involved? That's what I struggle with.
Yeah. So for me, I try to get them to see the benefit because I think that if the project managers see the benefit of this better work, better, meeting deadlines, fewer questions, that sort of thing, it impacts their day-to-day work as well. And so I think, again, talking about relationship building as a vendor manager, it's not just the freelancers and the users. I think it's also your in-house team. So maybe as well, I think for me, I kind of changed my mindset that way for sure. And so I'm always evangelizing what I'm trying to do with the project managers, with the program managers, language leads, anyone who will listen. And there is always resistance at some point, because ultimately they have to do a little bit of extra work as well. But it does pay off in the long run, because as I mentioned, the benefits are that people will take on work, they're more available. So, this really impacts project managers when they're, struggling to find people to work on their content. If people are like, yeah, I'm gonna work with you over someone else, boom, that's so much easier. They can assign something much quicker. So I think to summarize, I would say think about the in-house team as much as your freelancers and try and build those relationships and get them to see the benefit. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other question? I have the mic there. Oh, question from you? Here we have one. Mic.
Hi, I'm
Hello.
Christina Lupi from Crestec. I have a question. I used to work also as a vendor manager, so I fully understand.
Sorry, we cannot hear you though.
Oh, sorry. I fully understand, let's say, your pains and in engaging the suppliers, and I really totally believe in the fact that it's extremely important to engage them and make them feel part of the community. It's a teamwork for sure. My question is, I'm interested in knowing maybe the tips you learned from the freelancer about MT. Indeed, it's a bit of a difficult topic to talk with the freelancer. So what did you learn from her that you should not be doing? The don'ts.
The don'ts. Mainly, it was around post-editing guidelines and the lack thereof. So something that she brought up again and again was that because as much as it's been talked about in the industry for a very long time, it's still relatively new when it comes to actually assigning post-editing work to a lot of freelancers, at least in my experience. And so the thing that she mainly lacked was really good guidelines on what kind of post-editing that the client actually wanted. We tended to be very vague and very generic. And so some of the feedback that she had about that specifically was hey, it's actually much easier, it makes my job a lot easier if I know specifically, is it light, is it full, is it some hybrid between that's client specific, but please, give as much detail as possible. So that was the main thing. Another thing that I think that we are still defining ourselves at Vistaprint is payment models, which I think is a whole other subject in itself. When it comes to post-editing, because it's still quite new and there's still no real formal agreement. Is it per word? Is it an hourly rate? Is it a percentage? Do you just charge fuzzies? All of this kind of stuff. And that was another thing that she also brought up, was that it's not really consistent, and actually the freelancers themselves don't really know how to gauge their rates. So that was another thing that gave us a lot of insight, and that's something that we're thinking about a lot at the moment in-house. So yeah, thanks.
Hi, I'm Rens from AVB Translations. I was just wondering if you think that post-editing or machine translation is the way to go, because at Vistaprint I suppose that the main content is marketing stuff. So I was just wondering how creative content is suited for machine translation, and how your freelancers are responding to using MT for creative translations.
Cool, good question. The short answer is we're not. So for our marketing and creative translations, we're not actually using MT. So I brought it up because it's relevant to the conversation, but we are dividing the type of content that we're actually using MT for. So we're using it mostly for product descriptions, which are very repetitive. And we'll see how it goes, but sometimes website setup, so kind of software strings that again are quite predictable, CTA buttons and things like that. We do have this idea. Basically, there was one engine that worked very well with articles. So we have some content marketing articles on site, and actually it worked pretty well. We were quite impressed with the output of a machine. So I think it depends which which machine you're using as well. But that's sort of TBD at the moment. It's just product descriptions that we're putting through. So yeah, sorry to disappoint. It wasn't anything creative.
Hi, I'm Louise from Apostrophe.
Hi.
I actually have two questions. Maybe I start with the first, and if we have time for the second, then I'll ask that one as well.
I'll be quick.
So you mentioned the online QA evaluation sheets. Can you maybe explain a bit how that works exactly? Because I'm really curious.
Yeah, so it's nothing super future-proof. It's pretty basic. So basically, we created what is essentially a Google sheet. So nothing sophisticated. But what it did is it allowed us to take the QA out of the tool, which means that it didn't impact deadlines. So it meant that people could put the feedback into this sheet. And the beauty of it is that because it's cloud-based, people can look at it anytime they like. So the freelancers can deliver the work, just keep delivering their work, and then they can check their QA sheet at any time. But basically, from a sort of functional point of view, it's just every time their work gets reviewed in the tool by an in-house linguist, instead of sending the file back to the translator with corrections and then receiving it back later, they just simply put their feedback into the sheet. And so it saves time by just separating it. To me, it's not an ideal long-term solution, but whilst we have the workflows that we do, it's actually working out quite well. And like I said, it actually creates a dialogue, which is really, really nice. Like I've seen in this sheet, there'll be some feedback about some specific work, and then the freelancer might actually question it and be like, well, actually, my opinion is this, maybe it's a stylistic change, and then it actually turns into a conversation about the work, and that can get really interesting, and it actually makes the work better as well.
Thank you. And so my second question, do we still have time? Okay, cool. Let's be quick then.
Quick.
You mentioned that you evaluated several machine translation tools. Can you say which one you picked in the end and why?
I mean, I don't see why not. So for us, the best performing machine translation was DeepL. I can hear laughing. I think that's probably the same. The thing is, we did see some differences when it came to specific languages, where actually sometimes Microsoft or Google actually outperformed DeepL, but sort of overall, for all sorts of content, DeepL just performed the best for just such a variety of content. The only problem is it doesn't have any Nordic languages at the moment, so yeah. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jen, for this
Cool.
presentation.
Thank you.
That was really great.